discussion around the world has become much more volatile. Two speeds are emerging across different parts of the world. A lot of people talk about that's the way we kind of have to get used to the global world. How have you seen it getting played out in your context, especially the spec sector and the company? Do you see it as a huge threat? Do you see it as a huge opportunity? How is that playing out?
So let me look at what's happening in the world today and what it means for our sector. Okay, I look at it as a huge opportunity for the Indian pharma and biopharma sector. Let me tell you why. First and foremost, you know that healthcare systems the world over want low-cost drugs. India today is the largest manufacturer of quality low-cost drugs. First in the generics small molecule segment, which it already has a proven track record in.
Yeah.
And now it has a huge emerging opportunity in our particular sector, which is the biopharma sector. So biosimilars offer a huge opportunity for us in terms of global markets. First in the emerging markets and of course in the more developed markets in Europe and US.
Yeah.
But having said that, you know, there is also a huge local challenge. Before I get to the local challenge, let me also tell you that in the pharma, biopharma sector, another big emerging opportunity I see is in the area of research services.
Yeah.
You know, you've seen recent announcements made by all global pharma majors that they are cutting down extensively on R&D spends. That means there's a natural business opportunity for Indian companies.
That has to shift to India.
Now, remember, we are not alone in addressing these opportunities because you've got China, India, and many other aspiring young nations in the emerging economies looking at these opportunities. Korea is already looking at the pharmaceutical and especially the biopharma opportunity very seriously. Okay? And then if you look at research services, of course, we have China as a big competitor.
Absolutely.
Now, why do I talk about a huge local challenge? Because when you look at the local challenge and when you compare it to China, we really have to be concerned. Because when I talk about the local challenge, it's about the infrastructure challenge. Because you know that we are all grappling with this very poor infrastructure to support biopharma, pharma and research services. We are talking about talent challenges because we don't have a huge talent of specialized skills, okay, which we must develop. Then of course we have the regulatory challenges in India, which is slowing down the processes because you know that there's this huge regulatory slowdown that we are seeing in India because we are getting you know, approval timelines being delayed, and that's not good for the business. Okay, so these are the kind of challenges that we think are extremely important for India to address if we want to really make a huge opportunity of this biopharma pharma segment. You know, when you look at these opportunities, I also want to focus on another aspect, which is that recent studies have shown that there is a large recognition of the fact that India can be and is being perceived as a very attractive investment destination for manufacturing in pharma, biopharma. Okay? And there is a concern globally that there is not adequate talent and skills for this sector. So if India has to look at this in a very strategic way, we have to make sure that we translate these interest levels into investment.
So as I hear from you, and it's actually an amazing story, and the global uncertainty, the shift in the global growth pattern, the slowdown in one part or the growth in the other part, kind of is now creating a situation where India has a strategic opportunity here, and within that obviously you are an important player, and if we get the right kind of a local support which kind of catalyzes the sector, then this could kind of be a big growth engine for the country. And
absolutely, we see this as a very important growth engine for our company and for the sector. And we think that it can even deliver a 20% CAGR if we do it right, you know, over the next 5 years.
One of the things I want to also check with you, and inherently your business is a high risk, sector itself is a high risk sector. The uncertainties over the last 2-3 years would have further kind of increased the risk thought process in the company and the board and all of that. And are there any things that you have done specifically on this side, which is how do you kind of manage the risks and what do you do with that at a strategic level or in terms of operational processes? That would be very interesting to get inputs from.
You know, as you very rightly said, this business has inherent risk. And initially when we looked at risk management, it was very generic, okay? But we've had some very rude shocks. And I think these rude shocks, which have really been about poor risk management, have suddenly alerted us to the importance of risk management. Any business today is very vulnerable to financial risks, currency risks, regulatory risks,
political risks,
business risks which are inherent to each kind of business, and political risks. Now what we've realized is that for a company like ours, which is inherently risky, we have to keep addressing and assessing risk and mitigating risk. So the way we've done it is really to look at our business and identify which are those high risk areas and then risk mitigate them. So at a very broad level, we have balanced the risk between products and services. And then within the product segment, we have balanced the risk between generics, biosimilars and novel programs, and of course now branded formulations. And at the services level, we have also balanced the risk between a fee-for-service model to a integrated service model to a risk-sharing model, so that it has a play all across the risk levels. So I think as a business strategy, we have actually looked at risk as a very important part of that strategy. Okay, how do you manage the risk? So risk management is a very integral part of our business strategy. So very often when people say today that we cannot even come out with a 5-year business plan, I believe companies can come out with a 5-year business plan if they know and identify the potential risks and then manage and track those risks. I think if you do that, I think you may be able to come up with a very comprehensive 5-year business plan.
So whatever I'm taking in a way, the strategy of the company, the portfolio of the company has got a lot shaped with risk as a front runner lens. What about on the operational side? Because you are a global company, and a global company with an exposure in euro and dollars and many other currencies. And over the last, and then the currencies have seen a huge amount of fluctuation. Over the last few years, are there any specific changes that you have done in the way you manage the treasury and the way you manage your forex? That would be useful.
Yeah, so let me give you some examples of risk management and how we have addressed and managed these risks. So we certainly got a huge jolt a few years ago when we had that huge currency shock. And we obviously got caught in that particular shock wave or tremor, and we basically took a huge MTM loss that year. And we very quickly recovered from that because we realized that we are not in the speculation business. So we started taking a much more cautious approach to managing the financial risk in terms of exposure to currency risks. So we started looking at how do we de-risk or risk mitigate by exposing ourselves to multiple currencies, say euro and dollar. Also making sure that we moved away from a pure hedging policy to a more sort of insurance-based currency protection policy. And that became a much more sustainable, cautious policy that really makes it much less vulnerable to the vagaries of currency fluctuation.
It passes the risks through and shares the risks with others.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
Then when we look at, say, other risks, okay, so when we look at, say, innovation and commercialization risks, it's about sharing that risk. So we look at partnering as the right model in which to share those risks. And we have multiple partnerships, both on the commercialization front, where we work with several regional partners and large pharma companies. And of course on the innovation front, where again we work with small and mid-sized and large pharma to see how we share that risk. Okay, so those are some of the risk management and risk mitigation strategies.
One other area as a thing would be very helpful from you is in a world over, at some point of time, products and services get commoditized, and most companies are kind of facing a challenge on as the volatility has gone up. If your products and services have kind of got caught in a commodity cycle or have got commoditized, you are already at a wafer thin margin, and when the world gets a shock or your business gets a shock, you're just not able to kind of cope up with that. Your business is also kind of facing similar pressures globally. And there are lots of Indian players who are in the sector who kind of are making this business also very commodity. Any things that you are doing to kind of keep up with this pressure?
Yes, I think commoditization is also a huge risk challenge, and it's about a risk mitigation challenge. How do you address commoditization? So that's about mitigating the commoditization risk. And here what we've done is we've looked at value addition. How do you get out of commoditization and become a much more sustainable value-added player? So when you look at our research services business, we were a fee-for-service business, which commoditizes very rapidly. And so we've now got into a much more value-added, integrated offering and risk-sharing offering, like I told you, several models we have. So we have a play across them. Then we look at our historic business, which was an API bulk drug business. That also was inherently risky because it commoditizes. It has inherent commoditization built in. Again, we've looked at that, saying, how do we front-end our business? So in order to do that, we've looked at getting into dossiers, of course, branded formulations, and of course, looking at how we get into commercialization strategies that are front-ended. Rather than just being a bulk supplier.
So it's almost like what I'm hearing is constantly striving to find that extra value addition opportunity and keeping people on the edge to continue to look for value addition possibilities to make sure that you're never caught or you're...
Yeah, I think India cannot be always a cost arbitrage. It has to be a value arbitrage. So you have to use the cost base to deliver value. So that's really the model that companies who want to sustain a growth trajectory have to do.
And that's actually very nicely put, because then people think about cost as a way to create an opportunity, whereas the way you put it actually is quite brilliant. Just last summary thoughts, any few things that you would say, lots of people are facing similar challenges today. Any summary thoughts you would have for people to...
I really believe, apart from policy paralysis, we are really facing policy implementation challenges and timely policy implementation challenges. We must see that we deliver on these policies and make them consistent policies, reliable policies, not flip-flop policies, because that will boost investor confidence. Today there's too much of flip-flopping. There is too much of uncertainty around policies. How long are these policies going to remain untouched? We don't mind them being amended for positive reasons and for constructive reasons, but we don't want them being constantly amended as knee-jerk reactions to whatever happens in certain environments like we are seeing today. We don't want political conflicts to be affecting policies. And we don't want policies that have been announced not being implemented because of lack of political will. So I think all this has to be done, and fundamental to all this, I believe, is about very, very expeditious implementation of infrastructure. I think everybody must talk about that. It's a no-brainer to know that if you want inclusive development, that infrastructure in the semi-urban and rural areas must happen. Today you are seeing 50% of demand coming from rural areas. Automobiles, the automobile sector is seeing that, the FMCG sector is seeing that. A huge demand from semi-urban and rural areas because the purchasing power is there. But what's the point of this demand? Because there are no roads, there are no kind of infrastructural elements to support any of these consumption patterns. So I think we have to be very, very focused on that. And government, if they really want inclusive development and if they really want to take full advantage of the demographic dividend, they have to do this very urgently.